Welcome to the short version of the talk, Even Faster Exact K-Means Clustering, at the 18th Intelligent Data Analysis Symposium, or IDA 2020. My name is Christian Borgelt, and I'm a professor for data science at the Paris-Le-Dran University of Salzburg in Austria. In this talk, I present an improved algorithm for so-called exact K-means clustering. That is, an algorithm that produces exactly the same results as a naive implementation, but is much faster. As this talk is time-limited, a longer, more detailed version can be found at the URL stated at the bottom of the screen. This talk deals with bounds-based exact K-means algorithms, where exact refers to the fact that they yield the same results as a naive implementation, but in less time, and bounds-based means that they work with distance bounds. A crucial insight of such algorithms is that in order to be able to assign data points to the centers closest to them, it is not essential to know all actual distances. All one really needs to know is which center is closest, and this can sometimes be determined without computing all distances, or even without computing any distances at all. Bounds-based exact K-means algorithms maintain for each data point upper and lower bounds on its distance to different centers. However, the number of used bounds differs. There is always an upper bound on the distance to the closest center, but there is a varying number of lower bounds on the distances to the non-closest centers. There can be k-1 lower bounds, one for each non-closest center, one lower bound that combines all non-closest centers, or gamma lower bounds, one for each member of a certain family of subsets of the centers. These bounds are updated with the help of the triangle inequality applied to the distances the centers moved due to an update. The core idea is that if the updated upper bound on the distance to the closest center is less than the minimum of the updated lower bounds on the distances to non-closest centers, then the center that was closest to a given data point before the most recent update must still be the closest after the update. If only two distance bounds are used, recomputing the bounds, which will be necessary from time to time, requires finding the two closest centers. The closest center yields the new value of the upper bound, the second closest center yields the new value of the lower bound. The search for these two closest centers can be limited to a certain region, so the distances need to be computed only to centers in this region. The region is either a hyperannulus around the origin for the annular algorithm, or a hyperball around the previously closest center for the exponential algorithm. The Shellot algorithm, which is the main contribution of this work, is an improvement of the exponential algorithm. It also uses two distance bounds, one upper bound on the distance to the closest center and one lower bound on the distance to any non-closest center. Updates of these bounds are based on the triangle inequality. The upper bound is increased by the distance that the closest center moved. The lower bound is decreased by the maximum of the distances that the non-closest centers moved. If these two bounds need to be recomputed, Shellot also searches a certain hyperball for the two closest centers. The closest center found in the search yields the new value of the upper bound. The second closest center yields the new value of the lower bound. Shellot improves over exponential in two ways. In the first place, it maintains not only information about the center closest to a data point, but also information about the second closest center. The advantage is that it is likely that if the previously closest center is no longer the closest, the previously second closest center is now closest. If this is the case, it provides a better center for the hyperball to be searched, and at the same time a smaller radius. The second improvement results from the insight that whenever the search encounters a center that is closer than the centers currently assumed to be the two closest, the radius of the hyperball can be shrunk, thus potentially reducing the number of centers that have to be considered. In order to evaluate the relative performance of the different algorithms, I created a large number of artificial datasets. All datasets are comprised of clusters sampled from Gaussian distributions of varying size. The size of the datasets was fixed at 100,000 data points. I varied the dimensionality m between 2 and 50 and the number k of clusters between 20 and 300. For each parameter combination, I generated 10 datasets, each of which was processed 10 times with different initializations. Initial centers were chosen with k-means ++. As a result, I obtained this map, which shows for each combination of number of dimensions on the horizontal axis and number of clusters on the vertical axis, which algorithm performed best. Only the Shallot algorithm, which was developed in this work, the exp-onion algorithm, on which it improves, and the yin-yang algorithm are able to win parameter combinations. And for these, there appear to be fairly clearly delineated regions of algorithm superiority. For low dimensionality of few clusters, there is no clear decision between the Shallot and the exp-onion algorithm. This is strange, since there is hardly any obvious reason why exp-onion should be able to outperform Shallot, especially in such an irregular manner. A possible explanation of this phenomenon is that the execution times vary more, at least in relative terms, for lower dimensionality and fewer clusters, for which execution times are often very low. A closer look into these variations revealed that it is actually a plausible explanation of the speckled look of this map. Let me summarize. Improved exact algorithms, that is, algorithms that guarantee the same results as a naive implementation, rely on distance bounds that are updated with the help of the triangle inequality. Bounds-based exact algorithms differ mainly in 3 elements. In the first place, the number of employed distance bounds, which may be 2, that is, one upper bound for the closest and one lower bound for all non-closest centers, or k, that is, one upper bound for the closest and k minus 1 lower bounds for the non-closest centers, or gamma plus 1, that is, one upper bound for the closest and gamma lower bounds, one for each center subset. Secondly, whether center-to-center distances are exploited in order to stave off a recomputation of distances between data points and centers. And thirdly, the shape and location of the region that is searched for the 2 closest centers. Of course, this last distinction applies only to algorithms that use only 2 distance bounds. The proposed Shallot algorithm improves over the exp-onion algorithm. It also searches a hyperbole around the previously closest center for the 2 currently closest centers. However, it may choose a better center for this hyperbole by maintaining knowledge of which center was the second closest in the previous recomputation, and it may shrink the hyperbole radius while searching for the 2 closest centers. The experimental results demonstrate that the Shallot algorithm is superior to other algorithms for a large number of parameter combinations. Only for higher dimensions and many clusters, the yin-yang algorithm performs better than the Shallot algorithm. If you're interested in more detailed explanations, you can find them in an extended video available at the URL shown at the bottom of the screen, or, of course, in the paper. Thank you very much for your attention.